It's time for another Mike's Kitchen chat. And Collin Plume, who's the president and CEO of Noble Gold, one of our great partners here at Team Gallagher, loves to mock my kitchen because there's nothing on the counters. There's no food. I'm not much of a chef, but I do like talking to our partners and kind of breaking down stuff that we can't always do in 60 seconds or so on the radio. Collin, great having you back on the Kitchen Chat. How are you?
Mike, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And yeah, your kitchen looks great. You look great. You're doing fantastic. I'm jealous.
I'm trying. No. Well, you're doing fantastic. Noble Gold is doing fantastic, guiding so many people through these turbulent times. And I wanted to spend some time with you, Collin, to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, because this is a whole world that I'm not too familiar with, but you guys are. You were saying that you had an interesting story from China last week. Tell us about China and Bitcoin and cryptos.
Yeah, so obviously for some people they don't understand how sort of Bitcoin works and how the transactions work. But briefly, when a transaction is made, it's not that unsimilar to doing a bank wire, where before the money goes from your bank to the next location, it has to be verified. The people that verify the transactions with cryptocurrencies are called miners. And so these miners, basically their job is to verify that that transaction has never happened before, so there's no double transaction, if that makes any sense. And that's why Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency in 2009 to sort of survive, because there's never been a double transaction, which means if I send $1,000 to you, Mike, that $1,000 is in your wallet and you own it, and I can't resend that same $1,000 to another friend. So there's no double transaction. So basically what happened in China with the mining, so 90% of the mining of cryptocurrencies happens in China. And a lot of it has to do with the cost of electricity and labor. There's a city in northern China. Basically, the story came out that an oil field was getting reports they had all this electricity. They couldn't find where it was coming. They didn't know what was happening. So they called the police. Police came in, and basically there was an illegal mining operation that had dug into a burial ground underground. And they found all this, sophisticated computers and equipment, and they were basically mining there Bitcoin, and they were basically siphoning the electricity, from this oil field and other businesses. And this has been happening multiple times over the last 6 months. You're finding all these illegal operations, and they're, because electricity there is less, and there's just a lot of ground to cover. They're starting to open these up. So the province actually has banned Bitcoin mining, and that town of city of Deking actually mines. It's about 10% of the Bitcoin mining in the world is done there in this province. So it's interesting that you hear about all this crime that's happening, different things all over the world, and the crime that's happening there is they're siphoning electricity because it's so unbelievably profitable to mine Bitcoin. And Bitcoin from January to today has doubled in value. It was sitting at 5,100, 5,000 approximately in January. Now we're almost at 10,000. So you're having all these new operations that want to create get a piece of this action. And when they mine Bitcoin, they get a piece. They get some Bitcoin as that's their payment for monitoring these transactions. So it's interesting that you hear about all these different places in the world that are just trying to find value, and I think that will continue to happen because the value of Bitcoin is sort of just it's in its middle stage. I mean, it's got a lot of room to run here.
Well, I'm fascinated by so many stories and so much about Bitcoin, including the price of Bitcoin. I saw that Adam Back, who was one of the original Bitcoin contributors way, way, way back, 1997, said he thinks Bitcoin will go to $300,000 a coin within
Right.
5 years. You think is that accurate? Is that even possible, Collin?
Well, it's a big number, right? And I think that when Bitcoin 8 years ago was sitting at $300, and it rose 3 years ago, it hit over 20,000. I think people thought that was unbelievable too. I don't think that they thought that was possible. So I think it's a big number, but you have to think about what's happening right now is that U.S. dollars are obviously, they have to stimulate the economy. They're printing money. There's 1.8 trillion U.S. notes, coins, currency out there in the world. 1.8 trillion. In Bitcoin currency, there will only be 21 million Bitcoin ever created. So you look at almost 1.8 trillion in currency out there, and then you look at Bitcoin, which has a limited supply. So I think there's a supply and demand connotation with Bitcoin that you don't have with money anymore. I think low interest rates, stimulation, and I'm not the first person to say this, but we're never going away from low interest rates. We're never going away from stimulating the economy. So investors are saying right now, today, maybe stocks, we've had some upticks. Obviously, we've had some good days, but I think this year, a lot of investors are gun shy on stocks. I definitely think real estate is going to have a massive pullback because commercial real estate is going to get hit very hard this year. I think October, we're going to see a pullback. So I think that investors are looking for a return that they can sort of rely on. And I know that's wild to say that Bitcoin could be that place to get that return, but I think that we're seeing investors move away from paper money, and they like these digital currencies because they're not controlled. They can't be just printed out of thin air like all the other money of the world.
Having a Bitcoin conversation with Collin Plume, the president and CEO of Noble Gold. And incidentally, you can get a free IRA Bitcoin guide. Go to noblebitcoin.com, Noble, N-O-B-L-E, noblebitcoin.com to get a guide and a lot of information about what we're discussing. Because again, to me, it's riveting. I'm so intrigued by what many say is the evolution to the legitimacy of crypto. I was reading, Collin, that Fidelity, a huge, gigantic American financial firm, started a company now to deal in crypto in-house. They're even developing blockchain applications for their financial services. So, I mean, this does seem to be the legitimization of cryptocurrency. What could you tell us about a company like Fidelity and what they're doing with this company they started?
I think, Mike, the way that I've been talking about Bitcoin is that most large corporations, most large governments they have two faces when it comes to cryptocurrency. Fidelity is a great example. They have been invested in mining for almost 10 years. They have been they've had a huge fund for blockchain technology for almost 7 years. So they've been doing this. They've been investing behind the scenes in the infrastructure of cryptocurrency for a long time. And for that time, they sort of were gun shy about coming out about it, but yet they were investing their own capital in it. And I think that is something that people need to take notice of, and that's what most big institutions are doing, because they're trying to protect their first investments, the ones that they know, and then they're also behind the scenes taking a portion and siphoning off money because they do believe this technology is going to change the world. So they're also behind the scenes investing there. So it's really a two-faced approach for investment, and governments are doing it too. You have governments, we just talked about China, this region that's telling people not to mine Bitcoin. However, China came out last month and they're discussing having their renminbi currency become an actual digital currency. And they've actually had some areas in China where they're paying people strictly in cryptocurrency. So you have them, in the front talk about the yuan and this is unsafe and mining, and they're cutting back mining, but then they're also investing in it. So I think we're just not getting the full story from these major institutions.
I need to come back to the markets, the economy, what consumers are able to do. You and I were talking before we began our kitchen chat today about the stock market and the relationship between the so-called real world, when we're watching the jobs numbers and trying to bounce back from the literal shutdown of our economy. I've been reading about the way Bitcoin is behaving in relationship to the stock market. It appears, correct me if I'm wrong, Collin, but it seems like it's not as disconnected from the effects as the experts thought it was.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with why cryptocurrencies. If you look at, and I always look at investments, I look at the foundation, and why people are doing it. That's why gold is in my blood, and I've been around it for a long time because it's been in currency for 5,000 years. It's traded all over the world. There's a limited supply of gold, and it makes sense. It's something that we, as Americans, we've had in our culture. We used gold coins in circulation. Now, when you look at, Bitcoin, why did Bitcoin come about in 2009, and why have people fallen in love with it? And, I don't know if you saw, recently there was a protester that was at one of these rallies, and he was holding a sign that said, "In Bitcoin we trust," and it was, I think the reason that there's this love of this is it goes back to being an American, and it goes back to independence. People were fed up in 2008 that all the banks got bailed out in a tremendous way. And a lot of the reaction to that is what bred this alternative money, this alternative currency. People were fed up that the banks could go and just blow it basically, and create all these products and basically bankrupt themselves, but yet they could still get bailed out by the Fed and have not many repercussions. So I think in 2009 we had that reaction, and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was created, and I think we're having that same thing right now. It's another bailout that we're seeing in a lot of different ways, and obviously this was something that wasn't predicted, but ultimately it seems like a lot of the big corporations get a lot of the money that is allocated out there, and regular people are sort of fending for themselves, and I think that's the same kind of backlash that we saw in 2008. Is people they want a currency that's independent. They want to be in a situation where they can control their own destiny, and I think that's what Bitcoin gives people.
It doesn't really surprise me that Collin Plume and your team at Noble have become really a definitive, really great authority on this whole process. I just promoted noblebitcoin.com for everybody watching. Walk us through how Noble Bitcoin can help investors acquire cryptocurrencies safely in their IRA.
Well, that's the thing about Bitcoin is that people are saying it's too complicated. I've been wanting to do it. There's probably people earlier this year or last year that said that they saw the value when it was at 5,000, and they just didn't know how to do it safely. They didn't feel comfortable with a lot of the exchanges out there. So we help people buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, all the major cryptocurrencies within your IRA. And we walk you through that whole process. We do all the paperwork, and it really is as easy as making a phone call. And I always tell people, is this an investment for everybody? Absolutely not. It's not an investment for anybody. But for people out there that like digital currencies, that like where technology is going, or if you're just an investor that just is looking for something different, and you're willing to invest in something that is absolutely much more risky than some of the traditional ones, we can do it safely. You can buy Bitcoin. And the nice thing is it's not a fund. See, Fidelity's situation is a fund. So you're buying almost a mutual fund of cryptocurrency. This is not that. You are actually going to own the amount of Bitcoin or Ethereum you buy from us. You own it. It's yours. We just help you get there. So if Bitcoin goes from 9,700 it is today to 20,000 like it did 3 years ago, it's yours. That's your profit. You can sell it and keep those gains in your IRA. So what we've done is educated and just made it simpler for people to get into this investment. And listen, if it goes to 300,000, that's great. That's a big number, and everybody's excited to hear that. But I even think just this year's gain, the doubling of it in the last 6 months, is enough to get people excited about it.
We use the phrase diversify your IRA, your 401k. Wow, this is the ultimate journey in doing that. And again, I urge you to go to noblebitcoin.com. Annual maintenance fee of one of the lowest in the country, $195. An annual setup fee, $50. It's a great idea, and I hope everybody who's interested will go to noblebitcoin.com. And I hope, Collin, you know how much I appreciate your partnership with Team Gallagher, the Mike Gallagher Show. You keep fighting the good fight and keep educating people. And may the rest of 2020 be our best year ever.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike, and looking forward to it. And hopefully the next time, maybe a big pie in the back that you've put together, that you've slaved over, an apple, cherry, anything. I'm open to it. Maybe we can social distance, have some dessert together or something like that.
I think I can get a pizza delivered, or at least some chocolate.
Don't get me started. I'm in now. I don't want to take you off your diet, but
don't throw me off. I've made some progress here. You're gonna upend me. All the best, Collin. Thank you again so much. Collin Plume, the president and CEO of Noble Gold, joining us for another one of Mike's Kitchen Chats.
Thanks, Mike.